6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I bought it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely didn't.
Ready?
Making review. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So this is the 39th episode of Rank and Review with my guest.
Charlene Roach.
That is correct. You were correct. And we're going to look at 6 comedies that are secretly horror movies. And as is typical with Rank and Review, there may be coarse language and there may be spoilers. This is your host and random comedian, Larry Parsons. Thank you so much for listening. Well, caught you yawning. So we're going to start episode 39 of Rank and Review with returning guest Charlene Chuckworld Roach.
Hello.
Hello. And once again, we're not doing horror movies this time. We're changing it up. Actually, in episode 10, I did an episode called Homicide Made Hilarious with Natara, which was all like comedies with horror premises.
Was that the one with Heathers?
Heathers was in there, yeah. So this time, these are comedies, but I'm going to posit, I'm going to put forth that these are comedies that are secretly horror movies. Or there's something about it where I think that the horror of the movie might come close to eclipsing the comedy.
Yes.
So it's also a default, almost another what the fuck episode, because it is a fairly strange, it seemed random and unrelated list of movies.
Yeah.
But was it just that they were comedies that attracted to them? Was there a specific movie that made you want this one? Or?
Yeah, a little bit both. So you might recall our last podcast when we did true life horrors.
Yeah.
And I watched Schindler's List and Hitler's Last Days in the Bunker and all these really heavy true life stories, and I needed a change of pace. I needed and thankfully you still have these options that are on the fringes of, true horror, I think, and that's great because then I get to keep coming back. And so that's why I chose this one. I wanted something lighter.
Yeah.
And then also I'm a big fan of Death to Smoochy, and it was a movie that we watched a lot actually back in the day.
Absolutely.
And I realized that it had been years and years since I'd watched it, and so I was wanting to do that again.
Smoochy.
Smoochy!
The 6 films that Charlene and I are going to be talking about in this episode. From Barry Levinson, a political satire called Wag the Dog. Or is it a horror movie? From Mad Genius, writer, director, star Dan Aykroyd, Nothing But Trouble. Mm-hmm. Full of his, SCTV and Saturday Night Live buddies.
Indeed.
Speaking of SCTV, and we need some Canada stank on this podcast, and this is like the most loud and proud Canadian movie I think I've probably done so far on the podcast. Strange Brew: The Adventures of Bob and Doug McKenzie. Absolutely. The aforementioned Death to Smoochy, the critically lambasted Death to Smoochy from director Danny DeVito. Spike Jonze's first feature film, Being John Malkovich, from interesting writer Charlie Kaufman. And lastly, we have the sort of Hollywood satire, I guess, Swimming with Sharks, starring Frank Whaley and Kevin Spacey. All of them horror movies. Maybe. Secretly.
Secretly.
Behind closed doors. Ostensibly, yeah, they're all very broad comedies. And a lot of times with some of the lists, I can sort of cheat and say, yeah, but there's an element of horror here. But no, for the most part, all of these are straight up comedies. I think the only one that would come close to making an argument for, possibly, being John Malkovich. It's an adult fairy tale, but I think in a lot of ways a very dark one.
There's a crisis in the White House.
What's the crisis?
And the president's top advisors have been called together.
Oh, jeez.
The sexual misconduct occurred inside the Oval Office. With the election only days away, how much will this scandal affect the outcome?
The president spent the weekend pressing the flash. He wasn't campaigning, he was dating, actually.
Now, Washington's top spin doctor
We can distract the press for 11 days till the election. I think we got a chance.
has an idea,
We can't afford a war.
We're gonna have the appearance of a war.
but he can't pull it off without Hollywood's top producer.
Do I know you?
We have some mutual friends in Washington.
Why come to me?
We want you to produce.
You want me to produce your war?
Not a war, it's a pageant. We need a theme, a song, some visuals. We need, it's a pageant.
So Barry Levinson is a pretty interesting director. He's prolific and he does very different things. For instance, as he was making Wag the Dog, he was also in the middle of production for Sphere, this huge, big-budget sci-fi film, which also starred Dustin Hoffman. This was sort of like a twin sister, brother project, whatever you want to call it. But the fact that he was simultaneously making two so completely different movies is kind of impressive. The fact that he was working on two movies simultaneously, actually, to me, is kind of impressive.
Oh, yeah. Like we talked about in the last one, Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Spielberg doing Schindler's List and Jurassic Park at the same time.
Yeah,
Again,
mind-boggling.
impressive.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah, and that's like, to juggle all of that, you got to be a fairly sharp guy. And like I say, the movies are different. Like, just some of his resume: Diner, Bugsy, Toys, Good Morning Vietnam, Sphere. Most recently, he did this found footage horror movie called The Bay.
Oh.
Like, he's done a lot of. He's all over the place. So yeah, I like him a lot as a director. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that having Barry Levinson as your name on the credits means
Equals success.
it's going to be a good movie.
Yeah.
He's going to try something different every time,
Yeah.
and you can admire that. But when you're
Absolutely.
trying something different every time, sometimes you fall on your face. And the film medium is not like, I think, if you're a painter or something, you spend all of these hours painting, but when you do your art show, you only put your best 10 pictures out, right?
Yeah.
If you're a filmmaker, all of your art gets shown.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All of it gets out there.
You have to show it.
Because you got to raise millions of dollars to get it made. And if you're going to have a cast like you have in Wag the Dog assembled, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, yeah, you better come correct, So here we are with Wag the Dog. It's based on a popular satirical novel that was seemingly more than prescient. This movie came out right around the time of the Bill Clinton sex scandal. And a lot of people said that the whole let's go to war with Iraq was political distraction tactics to take light away from this sex scandal, which was arguably being overblown or not by the media, but to try and distract the people from that issue. This war is sort of started. In Wag the Dog, what we see is it's not an actual war that they're starting. It's a just completely media-created war that they're going to get the American people passionately and patriotically behind.
And they only need a few key shots to get everyone on board.
And they have a limited time frame. They got to get to an election, and they have to cover up a huge story, being that the President of the United States sexually assaulted a basically Girl Scout. I think they use a different name in
They
the
do,
movie, but
yeah. Yeah, but that's essentially what she is.
So Robert De Niro's character, who's like a political fixer, his name is Conrad Breen. He's like cynicism sort of embodied.
Yeah.
He is going to be the mastermind. He is somehow going to hold this together until after the election, so that however they deal with the fallout of the sexual assault, he's already president. So that die has been cast. And basically whatever he has to do to get the job done, he's going to do. So he goes to this big Hollywood producer played I think, quite well by Dustin Hoffman. He and some of his assistants, handlers, some played memorably by Anne Hesh and a few other great star cameos, get together to create this pageant and this war, such as the what would seem ridiculous satirical setup for Wag the Dog. What do you think?
Well, I hadn't seen this movie before.
Nice.
So so that was nice, and I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
It was really good. You know, sometimes like Wag the Dog was from 1997. I mean, that's quite some time ago now.
Yeah.
So you're never quite sure how these things are going to hold up. But I think, you know, you could tweak it in a few ways, like the cell phones they're using, and kind of make it current technology. And basically, you could do that film today.
But
and it would still...
It's not satire anymore.
It would... Yeah.
It really does sort of seem like prescient of like the propaganda machine that is most obviously represented by Fox News, but that is almost every major news network can be guilty of, right?
Yeah.
Not that they would necessarily knowingly create and flow with a false story, but in the desperate fear of being outscooped by another network.
Plus, the 24/7 nature of news these days, right? There's a pressure on them that didn't exist before then.
If you feel like you're being scooped by another network, you will go with that story before you know what the facts are. You will just piggyback that story.
Yeah.
And you will make it a huge story just by the thunderstorm that the media itself will create.
Yeah.
And this sort of craziness is exactly what Breen, the Robert De Niro character, is counting on.
Yeah.
And he goes to Hollywood because Hollywood is where the best creative ideas come to go.
Well, he's really stuck on this idea about, I think it's the Gulf War. Isn't that sad? I just watched this movie, but I think it's 2 bombs falling on something, on a building or something that's a shot from the Gulf War.
Yeah.
And that was it. Everyone was into the Gulf War and everyone believed it, or I don't know why.
One image.
But exactly, that really sold that war. And so, so that's what he thinks. I'll just go get this Hollywood producer. We just need that key shot, that key moment that pulls at heartstrings or that makes people really dig in and believe. And then we'll distract them for X amount of days before this election. And I don't remember the amount of days either. But I think it's like 12 or something like that.
It's a pretty
quite
narrow
short.
window.
Yeah. But in public attention span, quite long.
And for a story as hot as like this child basically being sexually assaulted by the president, it would be like they're up against the wall. But that's the thing. If the president does that, we don't want him to be president. So why is this elaborate machine here to protect this man at this point? Is another,
seriously
troubling question.
Yeah. And I mean, as you said, it came out around the same time as the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal came about. Right. It wasn't filmed then.
No.
That was purely coincidental.
Also based off of a novel that would have been written even earlier than this, right? So
yeah.
Interesting. The film is adapted in part by David Mamet. I think you can definitely hear some Mametisms in some of the dialogue, but the cast is definitely game and in for that.
I was just reading, because I did a bit of research on the film, and they said during the filming of Wag the Dog, they had an impromptu meeting with President Bill Clinton at a Washington hotel. So what's this movie about, Clinton asked De Niro. De Niro looked over to Levinson, hoping he would answer the question. Levinson, in turn, looked over to Hoffman. Hoffman, realizing there was no one else to pass the buck to, is quoted as saying, "So I just started to tap dance. I can't even remember what I said."
It's not about you. Definitely not about you.
So I mean, the fact that, Clinton was so involved, I don't know. It's a really interesting twist and sort of art reflecting life sort of thing.
I mean, it made it particularly strong and potent at the time, but I do think that at the time the level of subterfuge felt silly, like made this movie comic, and it doesn't anymore for me. I think that actually some of the humor is actually hurt by this because it's hard to laugh.
We're so far down that path now.
Yeah.
And when we look at, maybe at the time this was kind of a little bit funny, a little bit gritty sort of thing, and now, agreed, it seems light. And I think of our current political shows we might watch that are on the cynical side. Oh my God, how true is this really?
Like, well,
you know,
it's a prescient film in a lot of ways, and I think there's a lot of great people, a lot of show up for one scene roles, like William H. Macy, Woody Harrelson,
Dennis Leary, Craig T. Nelson, Kirsten Dunst, Willie Nelson, Harlan Williams,
Martin.
John Cho, Jim Belushi, Andrea Martin. It's
like,
it's great.
And like,
it's very strong
everybody's
cameos.
good, everybody's strong, and the dialogue is snappy and funny. But when I watch this now, I do not laugh. It's just it doesn't hit me on that
and
level.
that's the secretly horror part. Hey?
And that's where I sort of relate. Like, this should be funny, but I can't laugh at it. It's too close. It's too close to home. It's too close to the nerve. Doesn't mean it's not a great, fascinating, interesting film. In fact, I think in Barry Levinson's catalog, it would rank pretty high for me. And it also utilizes Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro to where their talents are. Dustin Hoffman is really good at big, flashy, speechifying, over-the-top roles.
Oh, and he's so fantastic in this.
He nails it, and
He
he's
does.
hilarious. His dialogue has a sameness to it, and under a different actor, we would get sick of his speechifying. But like every time he says, "This is nothing," it's funny, you know. And De Niro, likewise, he is really good at sort of playing his cards close, playing reserved, playing the thinker, but the master manipulator, the puppet master. And they're both playing to their talents in a solid script. So
Yes, they are.
that is all to the yes. But again, for a comedy, not laughing a ton.
Doesn't seem right.
Doesn't seem right. Willie Nelson.
I love that right from the beginning. They're like, we need a song.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's not enough to just create this image of war that we're going to broadcast over the media to try and hook people. We need to dig into the heartstrings further, get them going by creating this song. And so Willie Nelson at the table trying to like work out the lyrics and stuff.
Yeah.
And then later when they do the whole celebrity like sing along, like we're all getting together to support these people in Albania or the war in Albania. Oh,
yes, we didn't
we're
even
against
mention.
it. It's so ridiculous that it's gone.
The
to
pageant
that
that it's created is a false war with Albania. I don't know if that plot point got mentioned, but yeah. I like the way they can sometimes paint themselves into corners here. Like they're, like you say, sort of building a train track in front of themselves here and trying to keep the train on the tracks. It's like a moving machine. So they get down this guy Schumann, and they like the sound of the guy's name, so they're going to make him a war hero. And they pull this guy out of a prison or whatever before looking at him too carefully.
Yeah.
And by the time that they're going to introduce this guy to the world, they've got, they've implanted a record in the Library of Congress, and people are throwing their spare shoes on telephone wires when send Schumann home. And they find out that Schumann is like a drooling sociopath, just of no use to them. And again, in typical unfazable Dustin Hoffman pattern, oh, this is nothing, we can deal with this. And they do.
That's creative people for you, hey? I got this.
What's the message of the movie, do you think?
It's a pretty dark one.
It's sort of like the conspiracist angle would say there's like a room where there's a table where 12 people sit at, and those
known
are the
as the
people
Illuminati.
And they run the world. This is like the people behind the scenes really run it. The Conrad Breens of the world run the world, and he's, like I said, basically cynicism embodied. He is a very intelligent, very capable person who is knowingly using his powers for ill. And for the ill of everyone.
Well, and spoiler alert, at the very end of the movie, Dustin Hoffman's character has worked so hard, has put so much into it, coupled with the fact that he's, an egotistical
maniac.
Yeah, exactly. And he needs credit. He insists on credit. He can't. And yet, that is, of course, is the one thing he can't have, right?
And that's so
and
typical
De Niro,
Hollywood, right? De Niro basically said, we'll give you anything you want,
Yeah.
except credit. And that's established very early, right?
Yeah.
But That's the sticking point.
Yeah.
The one thing I can't have is the one thing I must have. But he doesn't seem to understand, because he is Hollywood, that he's playing in a real world. Just because he's creating a pageant doesn't mean that there is not real world consequences.
That's right. The stakes are high, and he doesn't get it. And then De Niro doesn't even fight him on it. Like, that's kind of, he just kind of nods, and he's like, all right. He tries to convince him otherwise, but it's pretty clear he's going to dig in his heels.
He does
and he just
try.
makes a call. You're talking about De Niro being, his character being really the one in control. He makes a call, and he gets him offed.
Yeah. But I do think he does try. He has the conversation. And you get the feeling like he could get anybody wiped off the map with a phone call. And he doesn't need to have the conversation.
Right.
But he has the conversation. And he knows that this man will not be able to keep this a secret.
Yes.
He just won't.
Yeah.
And that's the price that must be paid.
Yeah.
To keep America on the right track. To keep
and
this particular president in power.
And it's kind of a sigh and a shrug of his shoulders, and he moves on with his day.
Yeah.
But it's very dark. Politics is.
I do want to say that Anne Hesh
thing.
is in the movie. We didn't really talk much about her.
No, but she's really good.
She's solid.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't often say that about Anne Hesh. I mean,
she's been a little bit all over the map, shall we say?
I suppose. I guess I don't often say, wow, that was awful, but very rarely do I say, no, she's solid. She is, going blow to blow with Bob De Niro and Dustin Hoffman here in scenes, and she's holding her weight. Apparently, the role was written for a man.
Yes.
I didn't feel that necessarily watching the part. I guess it didn't seem essential that any of the character be male or female, but it was a solid performance, and I just wanted to call her out on that because I guess I don't often sing the praises of Anne Hesh.
Yeah, fair enough. So Hoffman's character is said to have been based upon the famed director Robert Evans. Similarities have been noted between the character and Robert Evans did Rosemary's Baby, The Godfather, Chinatown. Similarities have been noted between the character and Evans' work habits, mannerisms, quirks, clothing style, hairstyle, and large square-framed eyeglasses. In fact, the real Evans is said to have joked, "I'm magnificent in this film."
Interesting parallel, though. Robert De Niro played the devil in this movie Angel Heart. And in the movie, when he appears as the devil and makes his sort of Faustian deals, he looks and acts in a lot of ways like 80s era Martin Scorsese. And they're good friends, so you can't help think that he's sort of pissing in Marty's pool a little bit. You're the devil, yo. I'm not like a conspiracy guy, but this is the kind of movie that leads me down that rabbit hole sometimes.
Right? And why not? It could be. It totally could be. And then the other thing, and we were mentioning this earlier before we started recording, that Barry Levinson and his crew got the entire film in the can in less than a month. So you're talking about him filming Sphere and kind of being at a plateau or a pause in that production, and so he did this. But
some special effects needed to get worked out or something. I don't know.
Seriously, less than a month. I mean, it's largely a dialogue-driven movie. Absolutely. So I mean, I think that helps a lot. But all the same, well done.
It's also weirdly old-fashioned to have a movie that's full of fast, snappy dialogue, and it just depends on that to be funny. There's like.
That's true.
It's not necessarily about pratfalls or anything like that, Sometimes it's refreshing to just see a genuinely smart comedy.
Chevy Chase.
Hey, you just passed the Garden State Parkway South.
Don't worry, I'll get you there.
Demi Moore.
Oh, no, cop. Driver, step outside the car, please.
John Candy.
Read 'em. Yeah, that's nice, thanks. The lower back, please. I got an itch right up in there. It's good, thank you. Not today, sir.
This may be Valkenvania, but it is still America. And wouldn't mind, would you just write a ticket here, or we could settle it some other way, perhaps?
That's not the way things work around here.
What is this place?
Revolving District Court for the Village and Shire of Valkenvania is now in order. The Honorable Reeve Alvin Vulcanizer presides.
Dan Aykroyd.
Put out that dog rocket!
Nothing But Trouble.
So sorry.
I've mentioned Nothing But Trouble before. And anybody who's listened to those past podcasts kind of know that I'm not going to have a lot of great things to say about Nothing But Trouble.
When did you mention it? Whatever podcast, do you remember?
I believe in the episode in which Jerry Award-winning actress Demi Moore won her Jerry Award. I mentioned that she followed up her performance in Ghost.
Oh, with
Nothing But Trouble, which I referred to, I believe, as a debacle. It's written and directed and starring Dan Aykroyd, actually co-written with his brother. It's a family affair. and $40 million budget.
Ugh.
And
In 1991.
And as we discussed, it had an $8 million return. It was on every level sort of catastrophic. Dan Aykroyd is, successful enough that he, could brush this bomb off and go on to bigger, brighter things. From the man who brought us Ghostbusters, this is not what you're expecting to see. It's a comedy that forgot the punchlines, as far as I'm concerned. It wants to be dark and satirical, and Chevy Chase and this woman Demi Moore, who's weirdly attracted to Chevy Chase for some reason. I think that Chevy Chase's charm was running out of fuel right around this time. I think he had this movie, and he had John Carpenter's Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and then basically his movie career became exclusively Drek. The late great John Candy. Who does a lot of this movie in drag and without anything to say, He's not funny. In fact, he's the closest thing to funny in the movie, I guess I'll say. There is a strange charm to John Candy in drag that I would not have anticipated. Basically, the story of these two yuppies who get pulled over in sort of this rural hellhole and go through some sort of deliverance type of misadventure with these people that look like... Do you remember in the 80s they had Spitting Image, this puppet company out of Britain that did like caricatures of people?
Yes, did they do the royal family and that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Was it boxing matches or something that they used to do? Or?
They were in a bunch of stuff for a while. They did like a video for Genesis.
Oh, like a commercial.
They're really grotesque puppets, and the makeup that is used on Dan Aykroyd for a couple of characters and a few other just creatures around that you see in the movie sort of look like this. They're disgusting. The movie feels tangibly icky to me, and it doesn't seem like it's funny or particularly trying to be funny. Like, I keep missing where I'm supposed to see I needed a laugh track. I needed a studio audience to supply me with when zingers took place. But I'm biased, I guess. I was predisposed to not like this movie because it's always been a thorn in my side. So I'm willing to hear a second opinion. So where am I wrong? How did I misinterpret Nothing But Trouble?
Here's the second opinion. Swing and a miss.
Swing and a miss.
Yeah. My opinion is not drastically different from yours. It is. I had not seen Nothing But Trouble before I got this assignment.
You might have gone your entire life and not seen this movie.
Likely.
Not for this podcast.
An hour and 40 minutes. I'll never get back. No, it's very dated, as movies are from that time. Now, mind you, I have some leeway with that because I have a lot of movies from the 80s or early 90s that I still love.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not a complete strikeout for me, but there's a little bit of that. That said, the special effects, you talked about them being gross. They are. They're well done. The money in this movie was spent on the production value, what the set looked like, and then also the makeup. And I think the makeup went up for an award for something as well. It was that good. But so that stuff is really good and really strong, and still I didn't mind seeing it today. But the rest of it was terrible. There was no chemistry between Demi and Chevy Chase.
Yeah,
and Chevy Chase was like phoning it in or something. Like there was no variation to his character. He was just kind of the same guy, despite these terrible things. I don't know.
Well, he looked bored to vaguely annoyed, which is not inappropriate to his character's place in the movie, but I also felt it mirrored my expression watching the movie. I like ambitious comedies, and I like original comedies, and I guess you could argue that this is that. Whatever Aykroyd was attempting, I have never seen before or since. And the tangible yuckiness of it, it's weird, but it took me back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where I said the experience of the movie is so gross, like, that it gives it, like, you get almost a physical reaction from it.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that here. Nothing But Trouble too. There is something so gross about those sausages that they're eating, and like his coiled penis nose. Like his nose looks like balls. Am I wrong?
And those they are. They are from the from a profile shot. It's a penis.
Yeah.
It's a penis on his nose. Yes, and then he takes his nose off at night.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
Just
but then
for a horrifying moment.
Gross no-nose face.
There's this elaborate, you talk about the production values, like roller coaster death machine.
Okay, now that was good.
Yeah.
I actually thought...
Weird, like, bizarre system, Rube Goldberg sort of device to kill people in this most elaborate way. And somehow they're this own jurisdiction, and this guy's basically judge, jury, and executioner of this small corner of the world.
And it's like the worst fun house ever, right? Like, they keep getting caught in places and moved to the next place, and... Yeah, but I did like the roller coaster. I thought that
in order to get out of a speeding ticket, I believe is what the initial problem is. He ends up being betrothed to marry, transvestite John Candy. And Demi Moore is like cast outside to where Dan Aykroyd's ugly mutant grandchildren who've been cast out and are forbidden from entering the house.
And they're gross.
Repulsive, like Garbage Pail Kids,
like Garbage Pail Kids,
like
totally.
For another obscure late 70s, early 80s reference for the kids in the audience, but black,
yeah.
This is the most aggravating kind of bad movie to me because it is just steeped in talent. I mean, as much as I can talk shit about Chevy Chase, the man has made me laugh in the past.
Oh, yeah.
He will forever have Fletch. Him. He'll ever, he more than punches his weight in Three Amigos, and he's working with Steve Martin,
National
Golden Age, best of Chevy Chase, really, really good. But this, again, I think if you're doing this as a favor for a friend, and then you read the script and you're like, don't think it's funny, then what do? You don't quit. You just you show up and you do the lines, I guess. But
but he didn't even seem to have anything. Like, it would be one thing if you could see him really working at it, but it's not working.
Yeah.
But that's not even the sense I get. Like, his heart wasn't in it, and that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah. And Demi Moore just seems lost. She seems fairly I don't think that comedy.
And I don't think she gets her character. Her character makes really weird.
She
just reacts in strange ways that I don't understand.
I'm not gonna. She's a Jerry Award-winning actress, so I have to respect Demi Moore. But I do think that she's better served in a more dramatic, look at me cry, ghost environment than she is in a wacky, look at me fall down or try to seduce this repugnant man thing. It just didn't seem a comfortable fit. I don't even know if it was a performance. I just think that from a casting level, it made sense. Demi Moore was hot. She was a sort of a big celebrity at the time, so she was kind of a get.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she was right for it. But I don't know who would be either. So
no, not when the movie's wrong.
But
then can anyone be right?
It's not an easy thing to make a movie, and if you're directing this movie and starring in it, and you wrote it, and you're doing it while in this huge prosthetic makeup, being in the middle of that storm, I guess I can see it's possible, like the forest for the trees thing. You're into each individual moment, but you're not seeing the complete picture, and maybe it wasn't a comedy. Maybe this was apparently this was inspired by true events in a way. He was pulled over and he had to go to some local jurisdiction court and was treated rather severely by this sort of backwater judge. And this was sort of the seed. This is sort of his judgment on rural America or something. I don't know what itch he was scratching, but it's more unpleasant than it is funny to me. And it's a horror movie premise more than any other ones. As far as... your car breaks down or you get pulled over by the wrong cop and your situation just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
But I don't feel any suspense and I don't laugh, so the movie just spins and spins.
It does. It does. Wah wah. In doing research about this film, this was Tupac Shakur's acting debut.
Yay, Tupac!
when Digital Underground did their whole song in the middle, which you
Right.
neglected to mention. It's a
The
it's a
digital,
major point.
There's a
in
huge
the film.
song in the middle of the movie to help pass the time, I guess. There's a device Chevy Chase uses in the car that sort of like a direction navigation
Oh, that's
system.
right. It is.
It's
Yeah, like a
GPS.
GPS,
It's
a
funny,
primitive
though.
version.
Yeah, but that sort of thing didn't really exist at the time, and it was sort of a weird kind of, I guess, clever
Tip of the
thing.
hat to- yeah.
An ocean of reality, or an island of reality in an ocean of shit, right?
You got one thing right.
I think that you have to be a smart man to make a movie this bad, but like, it's not.
It happens. I think if you go back to your...
It's
your,
not bad because it's incompetent, though, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I guess the script had very
Right.
obvious problems
Right.
that only a writer would miss.
Right.
And that helps if you're both the writer and the director. But,
Yeah.
like, I've called Aykroyd a mad genius before, and I still think he earns it.
Oh, he's a
Sometimes-
talent.
yeah.
For sure he is.
Sometimes his mind will give us Ghostbusters, and sometimes
Yeah.
it'll give us nothing but trouble.
And it's worth Ghostbusters. And
Worth
that's
it.
just it. If he was a painter at a gallery show, he would show you Ghostbusters, and he would not show you Nothing But Trouble.
But if you spent $40 million making the movie, it's going to be on the screens. And yeah, it got some Razzie awards, and it's not remembered well, but it's not even infamously bad. It's just sort of this forgotten item, and it's sad, you know. In the early '90s, we didn't know it, but we were getting the last few performances from John Candy, and I still love seeing him just because I fucking love John Candy, I love the man. But I don't feel like he's being used to the height of his powers here.
No, I don't know why they chose not to let him speak.
Yeah.
Like, I know he's in drag, and I'm sure his voice would sound male, but we're looking at him in drag.
Yeah.
So we kind of know that already, but all he does is,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of these,
Also, total ending fail, can we say? If you recall
Yeah.
the ending of the movie, they get out and they're back home, and Demi's all curled up with him, and they go to a news story, and the whole Volcovania, wherever the place was, has been destroyed, but the judges survived. And he has the driver's license of Chevy Chase, and he says he's going to live with his new son-in-law in New York. And Chevy Chase turns and runs and leaves like a cartoon body-shaped hole in the wall.
Yes.
Da 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 da. Utter ending failure. If that was the world that we lived in, if like it was that much of a cartoon world that they could do that, why the fuck didn't they do that when they first arrived at the courthouse? You know. I wish that there were more like multi-million-dollar comedies that were sort of set in strange landscapes and did sort of ambitious things. And sometimes when you swing high, you know, you miss. And you fall flat on your face. But like you say, it's worth it. Because every now and then, you just nail it and hit a home run, right?
That's right.
So I'm glad Aykroyd's out there. But I could not imagine a scenario in which I would recommend somebody watch this movie. And I heretofore apologize for making you watch it. Because if not for me, you wouldn't have ever seen Nothing But Trouble, and I do think I might lose some sleep over that.
Are you being too hard on yourself?
You gave him all our beer, he's loaded. No way. He's supposed to roar. Maybe I ought to crank his tail, eh? That'll start him up. Okay, start up. Come on, eh? Maybe we ought to call Marlon Perkins, eh? Get Wild Kingdom here, eh? Hey, come. Oh, jeez, he's getting mad, eh? Yeah. Oh, geez, we gotta get going. You do the theme, eh? Oh. Good day. Oh, do our new movie theme, eh? Yeah, okay. Okay, good day. I'm Bob McKenzie. This is my brother Doug. How's it going, eh? Welcome to our movie, eh? Okay, our topic is movies. There's a difference between TV and movies, eh? Okay, go back to movies. Geez, now that hoser's growling. Yeah. Take off, will you? We're doing our movie. Don't wreck our show, you hoser. Okay,
Full disclosure, before we begin to talk about the epic Strange Brew, The Adventures of Bob and Doug McKenzie. As a child, I loved SCTV, and I loved Bob and Doug McKenzie. I just thought they were hilarious. I remember going to the mall with my friend Scott, who's been on this show, and we found really cheap vinyl soundtrack editions of this film on record. And we both wanted to get the same album, but we weren't sure if it was a good idea to get the same album. We had to call our parents to consult if this was a good idea. But we decided it was our money, we both wanted it, we both got this album. So I listened to the shit out of the soundtrack to this album, and there's lots of little funny beats to it. And it holds a special place in my heart. So it's going to be a positive review for me. But I dropped the caveat that I was all in it when I was a kid. I was predisposed. I listened to their comedy album. I watched SCTV. And then it's sort of fun that this sort of has an SCTV thread, at least through the first half of this. Andrea Martin was in Wag the Dog, and John Candy was in Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah, it's true.
Here we are. Rick Moranis' first feature film ever, where he was in it. And he and Dave Thomas wrote and directed this movie in Canada. And I've talked in the past about Canadian films have this strange thing where they seem to just be a little weirder than you'd expect them to be, or they would just go places that you just don't anticipate, and maybe they shouldn't go, but they keep you on your toes. I think that that's very true here in Strange Brew. There are many mysteries to this movie. But how in the world could I say that it's secretly a horror movie?
Good question.
Well, it's secretly Hamlet.
Yeah.
We can start there.
Yeah.
And if we want to look at Hamlet, Hamlet is a horror movie, or it could be. Either Hamlet goes crazy, or the ghost of Hamlet's father tells him to avenge his death. Either way, that looks like a horror scenario to me.
Yeah.
The canvas that we're painting on here is very different, though. Two hosers, eh? Bob and Doug McKenzie, they try to scam Elsinore Brewery, right? But it doesn't work out, but it does. Because they get jobs, eh?
Beauty.
Beauty, right? But then it finds out that the owner, her dad was totally killed by her uncle. And her uncle who's running things has this new guy there, and everything's all crazy. And they see totally the ghost of her father who confirms that he was murdered and stuff.
No,
and
take off, eh?
They get mixed up in this crazy adventure, right? Also, they're drunk the entire time, and they have this dog named Hosehead that flies at the climactic moment of the movie. And at one point, Rick Moranis memorably drinks enough beer that it turns him into the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yep.
All of these things happen in this movie. I find it charming, but maybe if you're not Canadian, and maybe if you're not into Bob and Doug, you wouldn't. So where do you land there, Chuck World?
Okay, well, you started with your history, and so I'll mention mine as well, because it is such a Canadian movie, right? Yeah. And so I didn't have quite the close connection that you did, although my dad really loves SCTV.
Right.
And so that's where it comes from. That ooh, coo, 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 coo.
Yeah. The Great White North,
All the time. All the time he would do that. So I was definitely familiar. It's funny, I don't remember seeing Strange Brew when I grew up. When I was growing up. I wonder if this was the first time I saw it, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, because definitely shots from...
This is 1983?
Yeah, 1983. Yeah. Definitely shots from the film I recognize, and some of the things that were said, because my dad is one of those people who likes to quote movies. So, I mean, I've heard some of those, but I don't know if I've ever seen it or not. So, that said, it's alright. I'm sorry to...
Well,
not be as enthusiastic as you are. But it's really dated, and I mean, of course it's a part of Canadiana, and so I definitely appreciate it on that level. And like you said, Canadian produced and Canadian writers and actors and the rest of it. I think that all that is lovely and excellent and should be held up as an example of a 1983 example of Go Canada.
Yeah. But it does really make me nostalgic for the era of really ugly toques and those like stubby brown beer bottles and like
and that's exactly, it's like this record of
and I do think particularly if you are Canadian, there's some lovely nostalgia. Here's like questions for you. Just I don't know if you have the answers, but why do you think that they went for the Hamlet structure here?
Oh God! Well, I mean, of course, it'd just be speculating. I have no idea.
I mean, I guess the idea is that if they're like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, or they're like they're the dumbest characters, they walk into like the most complex plot. But it's a strange choice, and not the first. A mystery that may never be solved. Another mystery about this film that may never be solved. How do they get Max von Sydow to play their villain? Paul Dooley plays Claude in the Claudius role, but he himself sort of is piggyback, or has a sort of an over-villain who's played by Max von Sydow, and his bizarre drug experimentation where he's using the neighboring mental psychiatric hospitals' mental patients to go to war at each other in these elaborate hockey fights. Doesn't it sound like that I just made up some stream of consciousness just then? That like I lapsed into some kind of seizure or stroke while I was talking, but all of these things are actual plot points in this movie.
The hockey games are great too.
You do not know what's around the next corner in this movie. And it's not often laugh out loud funny, although I'll argue that it does have its moments, but I have a smile on my face while I'm watching Strange Brew. So I'm not going to say not watch it, but I am going to say it is for that specific audience. And if you are thinking, I'm not sure if I'm that specific audience or not, I'm going to guess you're probably not. But, you know, you can orient yourself. I'm sure you could YouTube some Bob and Doug McKenzie, you know, and you can kind of get the idea for the characters. And it's so funny that of all the things that would spark a movie out of a SCTV, that it would be Bob and Doug McKenzie. It was so strange and, you know, weirdly distinctly Canadian. I don't know how it's viewed or how it is, you know, respected over the border, or if it's as big a deal in the excited States as it is in Canada. But most people our age group seem to be aware of it. Whether or not they treasure it or whatever. But, you know, it's a genuine sort of cult Canadian film. And we don't have a lot of those. It's hard to... The Canadian film is so undervalued, you know. It's hard to, you know, get your hands to any Canadian films made.
Yeah, like what if you were to put other films in this category, what would it be? What, Canadian Bacon? Is that one? Was that another one with John Candy and Andrea Martin? But it was later.
Michael Moore directed that, and so he's an American filmmaker shooting in Canada.
Right. So that one doesn't even count.
Yeah, but you know, you go immediately to Adam McGoyan and Cronenberg, but then you're going to the top of the list, right?
Yeah.
So there's not a lot. I mean, Bruce McDonald, maybe like Hardcore Logo and Pontypool and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. We undervalue our films, and it's nice that we have a genuine sort of cult object, and I do think that Strange Brew fits the bill. Strange Brew is an appropriate name for the movie. It is weird. It is very weird. Yeah. And strangely meta. It starts with like a screening of the Bob and Doug McKenzie movie, which is really bad, and the audience revolts, and then we cut to the theater, and Bob and Doug McKenzie are in the theater. I mean, you know, we're going to get to a real properly meta comedy when we talk about Being John Malkovich, but here we are in Strange View, this stupid Canadian SCTV comedy, and that's in the first reel here. It's there.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
I'm a fan, but I know that it's personal, so
I agree with you. It's a cult Canadian classic, and so it's worth seeing on that alone, right? So when people talk about it, you know what they're talking about. And I think it's fun to see all the ways Canada used to look like. Like you're talking about the short stubby beer bottles and stuff like that, or the logos that have changed. I mean, even that stuff can be fun to look at. And if you're familiar with Hamlet, then that's interesting. That's an interesting thing too.
I also, you know, I got to think that Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis must have had a ball. They wrote it, they directed it, they starred in it. There's a memorable scene where they're supposed to deliver a keg, but it's also an elaborate trap to get them killed, and the brakes are going to fail in the car.
Yeah.
But they decide to stop off home to feed Hosehead, their beloved dog. And when they do, they interrupt their parents having an active coitus.
Yes.
And their parents are played by Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis. This is strangely, briefly subversive sexy. And there's also that awkward thing of like kids walking in on their parents. But they're not kids, like they're at least in their late 20s for the story. The only reason their father puts up with them being around is they get free beer for working at Elsinore Brewery. I guess.
That's right.
But there's lots of strange and memorable moments throughout the film. It's worth a look.
Indeed. I have some fun facts.
Fun
facts to share about Strange Brew. Okay, so one of them was, before filming all the major breweries wanted the McKenzie brothers to appear in beer advertisements. The filmmakers had the promise of Molson's Brewery, but once the brewery found out that there was a joke in the film about putting a mouse in a beer bottle so that a complaint can be made in order to get free beer, they distanced themselves from the film. The filmmakers were also banned from filming in a brewer's retail store and from using the name brewer's retail. So in Ontario, right, alcohol, the sale of alcohol is owned by the provincial government.
Right.
So you have to go to an LCBO or, back in the day, a brewer's retail store. So because they couldn't use that store, they ended up building a replica of the store at a cost of more than $45,000 and calling it the beer store. They just kept it simple, right? So ironically, Brewers Retail later changed the name of its stores to The Beer Store, and they continue to operate under that name today. So there you go. Anytime you're in Ontario and you go to The Beer Store,
does life imitate art, or does art imitate life?
I don't know, man. The voice, not the actor as you said, of Bob and Doug's dad is Mel Blanc.
Mel Blanc.
Yeah, so that's
Looney
kind of
Tunes.
neat. Yeah, that's very cool. And during the hockey game, Bob says he saw Jedi 17 times, eh?
Jedi wasn't out yet.
Return of the Jedi opened in May of 1983. Strange Brew production wrapped in December 1982.
Right.
So not only had the McKenzie brothers not seen the movie, but they couldn't refer to its full title as the Revenge versus Return issue was still up in the air while they were filming. Yeah.
They have this weird post-apocalyptic, like Mad Max by way of Bob and Doug at the beginning of the movie. So yeah, they're also nerds on top of being hockey freaks. Yeah. Great to see lovable Canadian characters being embraced by the world.
Yes.
Go team.
Get me Smoochy.
You're telling me that KidNet is finally ready to pursue a show of Smoochy caliber?
Hey, it's Smoochy! Come on! Hello, New Jersey!
Despise you.
I loathe you!
Now.
Waiter! My body was barely cold and you went to work for the Rhino.
I gotta eat, don't I?
The only way to take back his career is to take down his replacement. In this jungle.
Going on safari. Safari.
So I'm a fan of Danny DeVito, the man, the actor, and the filmmaker, just generally speaking.
Yeah.
I like him.
Me too.
He's always, unmistakably Danny DeVito in the movies. He's very, distinct, but I think he's a solid actor. But I think he's an even better director in a lot of ways. I mean, I find most of his films to be very well made, very, richly produced. And he also has sort of a dark sense of humor. If you look at his comedies that he's done, you got Throw Mama from the Train. You got War of the Roses. You got this one, Death to Smoochy, that we're going to talk about. Duplex.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
And they're all basically very dark themed comedies. This is sort of an odd one in that when Death to Smoochy came out, it was sort of treated like the worst movie that had ever dared grace the screens. It was critically lambasted. It was a theatrical flop. It was another one of these movies brimming with talent that everybody just couldn't wait to line up and point and scowl at. Kind of surprised me, but I sort of believed the press, so I didn't see it. I sort of caught up with it, the Smoochy. Even people involved with it. You and I lived together. We used to watch The Daily Show all the time. Mm-hmm. And Jon Stewart would regularly shit-talk his own work
in
Death to Smoochy.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to like Death to Smoochy. Except for I really like Death to Smoochy. I mean, I don't think it's perfect. I think there's some problems, and I don't think it's anywhere near the best end of Danny DeVito's work. But I think it's got guts. I think it's got bold, dark, funny satire. The romantic angle, as so often in the cases of these romantic comedies or comedies, doesn't fly, especially in the backdrop of all this other darkness. The sweetness just doesn't render well. So you have to ride that line where it's too dark, where it's not funny, or it's still so funny but we can't take anything seriously. And especially with the wacky kids show universe and the over-the-top strutting performance from Robin Williams, the late, great Robin Williams. Yeah, it is. You said that Jim Carrey was originally attached to it. I kind of buy that. And Robin Williams seems to be trying to bring that sort of level of Carrey crazy, unhinged energy to the part. And some scenes it works better than others. But overall, I think it's a solid Robin Williams performance. But
classic Robin Williams in a lot of ways, because he does Robin Williams is known for doing a bunch of different voices and takes on things.
Improv, yeah.
And absolutely, that's what he does.
You got to believe there's a lot of ad-libbing there, and but you know, a lot of pep and a lot of energy. But I still have to say, you know, in the wake of the fact that Robin Williams committed suicide subsequently, you know, it's weird when you look at a scene that is darkly hilarious but still brutal.
Yeah.
Where he pours gasoline over himself and attempts to light himself on fire in front of a group of people, including children.
Yeah.
For a laugh. Star-studded for its day, too. Catherine Keener was, at the height of her popularity. Yeah. She kind of plays the same bitch role we're going to be talking about when we talk about being John Malkovich here.
Yes. Yes, she does.
Broom with Talent, like I say, Jon Stewart. No one had quite figured out how to best use Jon Stewart yet, but here he is.
But here he is, yeah.
Strangely, Harvey Fierstein as like a mob heavy, which seemed like a bit of an uncomfortable mix to me. But I think maybe if I didn't know who Harvey Fierstein was, maybe he would read more intimidating. But I just kind of was bemused by it.
Yeah. And Edward Norton.
And of course, our star.
Who had just come off American History X.
Yeah, and playing a total kind of yokel. So yeah, there it is. I like Death to Smoochy. I said it. I can't unsay it. It's going to be out on the internet. It's just out there. One of the most universally hated films of all time. And I'm going to sit here and defend it. Will you defend it with me?
I will.
Thank you, Charlie. My name's Larry Parsons, and I like Death to Smoochy.
I like Death to Smoochy, too.
Feels good, sort of freeing to say it out loud, doesn't it?
Such a release. Yeah, too funny. I mean, our humor has always been on the darker side, and so I definitely think that if you were to enjoy this movie, you have to be willing to go there. You have to be okay with it, right? I kind of think of Drop Dead Gorgeous in terms of the level of dark comedy.
Harsh humor almost.
Yeah, but if you love it, fucking hilarious. Just crazy funny. One of my favorite things about Death to Smoochy is the songs that Edward Norton sings to the methadone clinic.
We're gonna get you off that crack, oh yes we will.
We'll get you off that smack, oh yes we will. Oh, we're gonna get you off that smack. We'll get that monkey off your back.
It's catchy.
We'll get you off that smack, oh yes we will. It is, and yet to see all these depressed figures with half open eyes,
barely conscious, waiting their methadone shot. Watching this guy dressed in a homemade rhinoceros costume.
He's got a hockey helmet that he's painted different colors and added things so he can have it.
See, Chuck and I, with our dark little hearts, we laugh at this, but I think it's understandable and maybe even reasonable for somebody to look at that scene and just be aghast,
Yeah.
But if you're not aghast by that, if that is funny, you will get that. The basic story is, yes, Robin Williams' character who's had great success in the children's television, but because he happens to also be a crazy son of a bitch, destroys his own career through greed and stupidity. And he is replaced by this yokel, Edward Norton, who, of course, brings Smoochy to the world.
And being the antithesis of Rainbow I can't even say
Rainbow
it.
Randolph?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rainbow Randolph. That he's this pure of heart. No, he's not just a yokel. He's pure of heart. He really wants to serve his audience, and he's about proper food and nutrition, like all that stuff.
Yeah, I think an interesting note is played because this is Norton, fairly fresh off of American History X, where he was just this powerful force of frightening evil,
And he kills it.
Yeah.
He's so good.
The fact that he went this far to the other end is interesting, but I also think they used it because as Smoochy gets pushed through the plot, and I will get to the plot here in a second, as Smoochy gets pushed more and more, as, he sees how corrupt this world is and, real serious consequences befall him. There's this one little line he drops when he first created Smoochy as a recommendation to channel his energy in his anger management class, where you kind of thought this whole thing was seated in him repressing something, and that if that day comes where that pops, that he may just be the craziest fuck in the movie, right? It never happens, but maybe if they did Death to Smoochy too, they would go back to his his war background.
They would have used that more if they were just planting the seed in the first movie. Yeah.
I wanted to give. Well, let's talk about the plot. Sorry, I'm all over the place there.
No worries. I've been distracted.
Yes. Robin Williams' character has destroyed his career. They need to replace him. So Edward Norton gets the job. Rudolph is still sort of living in the fringes. He's been rendered homeless. And he blames everything on the rhino, and he wants to destroy his career.
Yeah.
And over a series of plans, some funny, some not, most of them fairly unsuccessful, he tries to either destroy and or kill Smoochy. That's the basic premise.
Yeah.
It gets complicated by gangsters and, talent agent played by Danny DeVito, who all want to try to exploit this guy, but unlike every other schmuck who arrives in Hollywood, doesn't understand how to play ball and make money. He legitimately wants to make programming that is good for the kids, and he wants to sell them healthy vegan food, and he wants to do the right thing, and he's not full of shit. He is the real deal, and nobody knows how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a nice little clever part of it, of the story anyway, I think. Problems, I think it's too long, and I think that the relationship angle between Catherine Keener and Edward Norton, they're trying to make this into sort of an arc and a romance. I don't know. Where do you land on it? I'm always giving a hard time to the romantic angles in movies. I know. Listening to the edit, I was like, I'm always hard on the romance, but I didn't buy it here.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't always need to be there. I mean, I'm hard on the romance angle sometimes too, because I think it's just an easy way to go, we want women to watch this movie, and women need romance, so we need to... we enjoy a good storyline just like fucking anyone else.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be about love unless that's a natural part. Yeah. So I agree with you. I think that it's maybe it wouldn't have bothered me as much if I felt like their chemistry was better. Yeah. But because their chemistry didn't work, I didn't buy what was going on, and then it felt more put on.
There was no reason for him to like her except that she was pretty. Because she was basically...
She's super bitchy.
Openly bitchy to him the whole time. Full on bitch face all of the time.
And then she does like a 180.
And then we have a scene where we find out not only is she into him, but she has this history where she's like...
She's been pushing him away.
Yeah. She's like a kid show groupie.
She really wants him.
She likes children's TV hosts. It's her personal grind.
Yeah.
And if they'd seeded that, or if there was something in the performance that suggested that this hostility was coming from an intense attraction, I think that maybe I would, it would make sense.
Sure.
But I didn't get that. To me, I was like, she's just being shitty to him. And I know he's dumb, but he can't be so dumb as to be attracted to someone who's so openly shitty to him, right? So, no, I don't think that angle worked necessarily. I also want to talk about, I think, the person who maybe steals the movie for me. We are introduced to this character, I guess the slang term would be palooka. He's a boxer who has taken way too many hits to the head. You know, nowadays this is more of a serious thing that is looked at, people who make their career in boxing and football having head injuries. But I'm going to say Michael Rispoli plays Spinner, the sort of... He's basically a mascot for this restaurant, which is backed by the Irish mob. And he made their fortune. He's the reason that they're so successful. And they genuinely love and care for him. But he's a handful. He's taken so many hits to the head that he's basically, he's like a child.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really have any understanding of controlling the volume of his voice. He's very excitable.
Or how strong he is, or...
He's also very sweet. There's something really genuine and nice about him. And he's so excited to meet Smoochy, the rhinoceros. And I don't know. It's a role. It's a tough tightrope to dance because, are we making fun of people with brain injuries? No, I don't think we are,
No.
But I don't think it's inauthentic either. I think that he made him a full, rich character, and it doesn't play out for Spinner, and it kind of sucks. You're like, oh, dude, no. And it's that murder scene where then all of a sudden the movie starts to maybe try to take itself seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a tonal mistake. I think they start broad and goofy, and they should have maybe just stayed with that.
Yeah.
Tighten up the timeline, cut down or even lose the romantic angle.
Yeah.
And don't ask us to, be moved by it. Just ask us to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe DeVito might have been a little over-ambitious.
Yeah.
Especially when we get to this operatic ice show that we're going to talk about at the end of the movie.
So the singer Henry Rollins auditioned for the part of Spinner, and Rollins talks about that first audition with Danny DeVito on his spoken word performance DVD, Henry Rollins, Up For It,
right,
circa 2001. And part of which consisted of him throwing a chair at Danny DeVito. So we were just saying, yes, Henry Rollins, you're good in other ways, but Spinner being the lovable thing that we, I can definitely see how...
There's something super intense about Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
You can't even help it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like I talk about Mark Wahlberg always looks vaguely pissed off, or Ice Cube always just looks vaguely pissed off. I don't think it's that they are. It's just like their standing general face just looks like they're vaguely irritated.
Yeah.
Not their fault. Similar thing here,
It's a great movie. If you love really dark comedies, this is definitely worth checking out. I don't think I don't understand why it deserved such panning. Certainly understand partially why, or why people would say, maybe mid-range movie, 3 out of 5 stars or something like that. But it's not a 1 star. It's
disappointing considering the level of the talent involved and the pedigree.
And I think it's quite quirky as well. It's really kooky to be in this children's entertainment world, and like you're saying, the ice dancing at the end and stuff. Like, I guess maybe for mainstream, it's really kind of pushing it for them, maybe.
Well, they've kind of, when they go super serious and we're trying to get a little bit into Edward Norton's psyche, and is he legitimately going to break, or is he going to stay this, sweet but maybe kind of dumb, naive, let's say, fellow,
naive.
Or is he going to go back to what and only very vaguely hinted at dark past, right?
Yeah. Well, and at the end they leave it open, like they wanted to do more.
Yeah. He chases down the person that he feels responsible for Skinner's death with a gun, and they try to make you believe that he's going to shoot him, and it becomes this big moment for the film. And this big ice show that he makes, the designs, that's all for him. It seems like a break in his character, because he's always talking about for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That ice show was all about what had happened to him since he made his fortune becoming Smoochy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine what a kid in the audience of this ice show would make of it. Other boredom or fear, maybe, And then,
it's not a kid's show, some of it.
And it's, of course, interrupted by a sniper taking a shot and almost killing Smoochy,
Yeah.
Played memorably, I thought, by Vincent Schiavelli, an interesting guy. In one of his last roles, one of the first lines that he gives, I always laugh when I hear it, is... sorry if I smell like piss, but, sometimes you smell like piss, I guess. I think that there's enough good that... I understand why people would be disappointed, like I say. This is, considering all the people involved, this should have been good. The writer also has a writing credit on this infamously not great comedy called Cabin Boy.
Oh.
So, not a great pedigree, I guess, from there. But everybody else involved, this should have been an amazing movie. And it's a pretty good movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll still say, check out Death to Smoochy. Don't believe the negative hype.
Mm-hmm.
Is it for everybody? No.
No.
It's a very dark comedy. And as far as why we consider it secretly a horror movie, well, yeah, people are killed, Even the ending, the problematic, like I say, seriously toned ending. Yeah, it's very noble that he refuses to pull the trigger himself and he's going to be the rhino. But he leaves them in the loving, caring hands of the Irish mob.
Yeah.
Who I'm pretty sure aren't going to,
let him go.
give him a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like,
he just cleans his hands of it directly.
You gotta keep it light and goofy so that, like, there's still death, but it's not as felt. The stakes are there, but not so high as that, that it runs into thriller genre. I mean, I think it didn't quite know where it was tonally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good call.
The comedy, like you say, the songs and the satire, the penis-shaped cookie, like, that stuff all works
does not
fine.
mean he's just adjusting.
That's right. This is memorable stuff to me. Like, I just think that's really bold, like, funny.
It is, and you need to hear the rest of that song too. That is just one line. Kills me. Fun facts for Smoochy. Okay, so the ice skating stunts at the end of the movie, because they didn't just give you an ice show, they actually did a bunch of tricks and what have you. Were choreographed and skated by Canadian skater Elvis Stoiko.
Stoiko.
There you go.
But what would Brian Boitano do?
When hosting the 78th Annual Academy Awards, Jon Stewart mentioned this movie as one of his few acting jobs. He said, "Welcome to the 78th Annual Academy Awards, hosted by me, the fourth male lead in Death to Smoochy. Rent it." And in Sheldon, who's Edward Norton's character, his house or apartment, he has a picture of a rhino on the wall. He kept that picture, and apparently it's hanging on his wall to this day.
Aww.
Aww. Yeah.
7.5, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome to the 7.5 floor of the Merton Plummer Building.
My name is Craig Schwartz, and I have an interview with Dr. Lester.
Please have a seat, Mr. Juarez.
My name is Schwartz.
My name is Warts.
Which of these two letters comes first, this one or this one?
The symbol on the left is not a letter, sir.
Damn, you're good.
Do you know that I don't even know your name or where you work?
And 50 other lines to get into a girl's pants.
So, honey, you thought any more about us having a baby?
I think that maybe we should just wait and see if this job thing pays off. There's a tiny door in my office, Maxine, and it takes you inside John Malkovich.
There's no such thing as a hole into somebody's brain.
Yes, there is. You see the world through John Malkovich's eyes, and then after about 15 minutes...
That's not me. I didn't say that.
You're spit out into a ditch on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike.
It was amazing.
I don't think anybody could have seen being John Malkovich coming, really. I mean, Charlie Kaufman was not the brand that he's sort of become. But he'd been known for, like, writing the sitcoms, like Sybil Shepherd's TV show, not a huge pedigree. And Spike Jonze was basically the guy who, hung out with the Jackass crew and did cool music videos and skateboarding videos and, plot such as it is. Our main character, played by John Cusack, gets a job at the Merton Plummer Building on the, is it 7.5 floor?
Can't believe we can't remember.
Is it the 7?
Me neither.
Anyway,
It's a half floor.
Yeah, so his entire working environment he has to slouch in. He's introduced to his job through a training video that gives us the history of the building. And the entire world of being John Malkovich seems to be populated by odd and strange things. Interestingly, the essential love triangle that we have in this movie between Catherine Keener and John Cusack and Cameron Diaz, thank you. I totally had a brain. And okay. Cameron Diaz.
I spaced out for a second.
It basically becomes just a love triangle between these three characters, complicated by this portal that John Cusack has discovered, which gives him access to John Malkovich's brain.
Mm-hmm.
At first, he just sort of is a piggybacking observer of John Malkovich, but as we get deeper into the movie, he finds he can control it, and this gives him certain advantages.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bizarre movie. It's a bizarre premise, and to break down the plot much more beyond that, I don't know what it would serve. We could talk you through the whole map of the movie, but it's a movie that kind of runs on its vibe. It is telling a story, but it's telling a story in a different world than we've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's full of really good performances, but I have to say, the two really fascinating performances, to me, first off, I'd have to say, well, John Malkovich.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you get this script on your desk, you're going to say yes to the project. But he has to play himself, in quotation marks, and then himself possessed by various different characters. And, himself also dealing with the stress of, am I going mad? What is happening to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also want to give some points to Cameron Diaz, because I've not seen her play in a role like this. And it's not just because, she's a pretty person who makes herself plain for the movie. It's a different character for her. She's not in like a particularly powerful character in a lot of ways. She's got wants and needs, but she doesn't know how to get them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting movie, and it keeps on throwing ideas at you. And I think it casts a spell. What you feel about or how you feel at the end of the movie, I think largely sort of is maybe where people will land on it. I look at it as kind of a fairy tale for adults, but like I say, a very dark one. Because when we get to the ending, and I do want to talk about it, I think that it's quite dark. And for a movie that is ostensibly, I guess, an absurd comedy, I think it might suffer from a problem that I have with a lot of horror movies, in that who do we cheer for in this movie?
Well, I probably cheer for Malkovich more than anything else, for him just to regain
That's the
his
correct
brain
answer,
and body
as far as I'm
back.
concerned. Everybody exploits him.
Yeah.
The
They
Catherine
do.
Keener character, much like in Death to Smoochy, sort of presents herself as a, full force bitch, pretty much entirely. It was just sending out a vibe of no throughout, but when she sees a way that she can exploit the John Cusack character, and if that means she's got to cuddle up to him a little bit, she's willing to do that if it means money.
Yep.
And she gets turned on by the power and the manipulation, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one line where she says it's puppeteering, when she's convinced of the validity of puppeteering as an art. It's not playing with dolls, it's playing with people.
Yeah.
That's what makes it exciting to her, the idea of playing and manipulating the people. I think that her character is incredibly unlikable, and she is the coveted object. She's the thing that destroys the marriage between Cameron Diaz and John Cusack, and she swings back and forth between both characters like a pendulum to wherever her needs are. I guess of the three, I'm the most sympathetic to John Cusack's wife, like
Cameron
Diaz. She is not altruistic. She does some bad things, but her want...
She probably means well more than...
Her want comes from a genuine loneliness, and her husband, in the worm-turning scene for the John Cusack character, literally hog-ties her and throws her in a monkey cage and leaves her there. But I would hate that scene, but then we wouldn't have the beautiful monkey flashback in which the monkey remembers how to untie Cameron Diaz. So many lovely, bizarre, wonderful moments throughout the film.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah, it is. It is such a strange movie. It's totally out there. It's totally on its own vibe. It's, I don't know, then the fact that, I mean, they could have called it Being Whatever Name and not chosen a famous actor.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They raised the stakes by choosing someone who was going to use his real name too. It's wonderfully bizarre, and it is, I think the fairy tale analogy is a good one too.
The world is strange and heightened, but it has a strange consistency to it.
Mm-hmm. And you don't know what's going to happen next.
Ever.
And it makes it so compelling because you have no idea what direction they're going to turn in. You know, like when Malkovich goes down the tunnel.
Malkovich goes into his own portal. And the question is asked, what happens to a man who enters his own portal? This also infers that every man has a portal, I guess?
Sure.
Maybe? I don't know. Well, we didn't get that. We only ever see Malkovich's portal.
Yeah.
But we are treated to a very spectacular series of visual oddities. Rooms full of Malkoviches.
Malkovich.
The world of Malkovich. And when he spit out the other side, he is almost rendered insane by it.
Yeah.
That is a crazy scene. And it's amazingly well rendered by a clearly visually astute director.
Yes.
And then you follow up that scene. Who does he go to for advice, to console? Who is Malkovich's rock? Charlie Sheen. The fact that it's a plot point that the person that he goes to talk to about his crazy girlfriends or these weird voices in his head is Charlie fucking Sheen. And that becomes more funny as time goes on.
Yes, it does. Winning.
Absolutely love this movie. But I gotta say, when we get to the end, the smile kind of dies in my face a little bit when you sort of think, as silly as this movie is, it does have some kind of dramatic stakes. You want to see the story through. I don't know who I'm cheering for, but I'm most sympathetic to...
But it rides the edge. Like, it remains playful for so long. And maybe it's gonna, now it's gonna get really dark, and it does a bit, but it just drops sharply.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I agree with you. I'm sympathetic to Malkovich. All of a sudden, he's hearing voices in his head, or he feels like his body's being moved. This woman shows up out of nowhere, who seems to be trying to talk to one of the voices in his head. Worse than that, all of a sudden, he ends up getting his body completely overtaken.
Yeah.
For a long period of time. John Cusack just manages to stay inside of Malkovich. He thinks it's because he's a puppeteer that he's better at using the body, but he can choose to hang on for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And that's how he wins, quote unquote, and ends up being with Catherine Keener. All this time, Malkovich is pushed back to the back of the head where he's basically just a witness to all that is going on here. And to have your entire body and life hijacked from you and sit there as a mute witness, that's kind of horrifying. And we find out
absolutely horrifying.
Even when he is freed, when the Cusack character is, talked into leaving Malkovich briefly, it's all for naught. The group of people that we find out who have been following Malkovich with such interest have been waiting for, quote, his mind to become ripe, so that they all may go into the portal, and they'll sort of mold into this one Malkovich person, and in that way perpetuate and ostensibly live on forever.
Yeah.
But in theory, if we're going through the context of the movie, Malkovich is still pushed to the back seat. He's still lost and obliterated and permanently just going to be able sitting in the back watching, having no say, no control, which is an ugly fate. Uglier still is the fact that because we find out after the portal has been used that time when the brain is ripe, all of the things divert to the next in line. So when John Cusack goes in, he goes into the fetus of the pregnant Catherine Keener, where he has to stay forever in the back of that girl's mind and watch the two women that he loved live this life together through the eyes of their daughter. Well, his daughter.
Sort of a just fate for him.
Through the eyes of his own daughter. Well, he's a villain, and he, like I say, when he hog-ties his wife and throws her in the cage, I'm no longer cheering for him.
No.
But as an eternal, cruel, fate, it's brutal.
It is brutal.
I don't really have any satisfaction in the fact that the ladies got together. I wasn't happy for them.
That's
true.
Because
I didn't like either of them.
Yeah.
Malkovich is obliterated. Two characters we don't like get together, and one character we don't like is given the most hellish punishment almost imaginable.
It's a great movie. You should see it.
Credits, and it's a comedy. It's a comedy that's secretly a horror movie.
Yes.
But it is absurd and it is worth the journey. And it sounds like I got all dour at the end. I don't think they necessarily stick the ending. I think the ending's part of the reason that sort of makes it memorable and distinct.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's one of the things that's kind of a deal breaker for some people with this movie.
Yeah.
They're like either going with the funny vibe and then all of a sudden it gets kind of sort of dour and dark and sort of almost serious.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah, I think it's not for everyone. You really have to be able to go there.
Yeah. And
it is so strange and so out there and so, yeah. So if you can jump on that bandwagon, you're good.
But both Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman, you know, they made an instant fan from me. Like anything
and
either
continue to prove.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything either of them will lend their name to, I'll take a look at.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I don't need to know anything else about it.
Yeah.
So I'm positive on being John Malkovich. Is there anything else you would like to say? Do you have some fun facts to share?
I do have. I searched down it. Well, fun fact number one, and perhaps this one won't surprise you really, is that when Spike Jonze approached John Malkovich about being in the film, the actor said he liked the concept, but thought another actor would do a better job. He offered to help with production, but ultimately turned it down. After several years of persistence on the part of Jonze, Malkovich agreed to star in it.
Huh. You see, that just seems like something that you would just say yes to.
I mean, certainly John Malkovich is the type of actor who can pull it off, and he does, right?
I guess the question
But it is rolling the dice to have a movie called, you know, being John Malkovich, being myself, and it's so quirky and odd and out there. And
I guess you wouldn't want it to be a bad film, I guess. And the worry with something as bold and original as this, that it's either going to be embraced or not. I think it was embraced, but I think if somebody came to me with that script and wanted to use my likeness, I would just be tempted to say yes, just because I'd be weird. Like, why did you choose me? Why am I your quote unquote everyman? And then we read it and just see how weird and dark it is. Like, yes, by all means. I don't think I would need too much whining and dining, I'm saying, but I don't think that there's a paying acting gig I would say no to. So.
The other thing was the can scene. Remember the scene where the drunk man throws a half-full can of beer at Malkovich's head?
Yeah.
That actually happened. So initially, director Spike Jonze didn't want to do it, but according to Malkovich, many volunteers' hands went up when he talked about it.
Right.
So John Cusack's writing partner ended up being the chosen one who threw the beer can at his head. Yeah, those were the two fun facts I had about that.
Well, I think that it's an experience worth having. Not everybody will love the movie, but I think if you're into movies, you should get around to watching it.
Yeah, check it out.
So, Guy, let me ask you a question. Why do you want this? All my favorite memories have been of movies.
Guy has just started working for the biggest producer in Hollywood.
I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you could start right away.
And he thinks he's in heaven.
You
Who do you work for?
have
If you were in my toilet bowl, I wouldn't bother flushing it.
no brain.
Too bad. He's gone to hell.
I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm just trying to help.
The boss who owns him.
What are you doing?
So Kevin Spacey went through this period in the 90s where every movie he was in seemed to be super popular and really good. The streak inevitably had to end, but I sort of include Swim with Sharks in this sort of canon of great 90s Spacey performances.
For sure.
And it's one of the quintessential sort of son of a bitch roles. And he's done a few of these, but I really think that this Hollywood producer who spends his time berating his personal assistant, played by Frank Whaley, is one of the roles I think about. If I'm thinking about Kevin Spacey, I kind of go to Buddy Ackerman, I believe, is the name of the character that he's playing. And he has spent his life to get to the position that he is in, and he has eaten a lot of shit. But now that he's in the big chair, he is going to enjoy himself. And part of the gig is that he gets to treat his assistant like meat. It's just how it's done. It's just...
paying your dues.
In a way, it's not even personal. And the position is so coveted / feared that even though it's basically a menial job, if you do it long enough, you're almost guaranteed some kind of juicy position somewhere in the Hollywood machine to make your years of humiliation worthwhile.
Yeah.
And what we basically are treated to is this kid from his first day to the end of his first year in this sort of Hollywood meat grinder. And where he goes from sort of starry-eyed, gosh, it's my first day, I'm going to give it my all gumption kid, to a guy we see who has kidnapped, tortured, who has his boss tied to a chair and has been torturing him. We see the entire story as sort of a series of flashbacks as Kevin Spacey's character is being tortured by Frank Whaley. And we see why we got to the place where we are. And it's a comedy.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a comedy. I do think it certainly belongs more in the comedy rack than the thriller rack.
Yep.
But it is dark, like I said. And
Yes.
I do think that it does have some sharp edges to it. Especially when we get, once again, to the third act. Also interesting faces to be seen here. Michelle Forbes sort of plays another producer and possible love interest. And a really nice one-scene role from Benicio del Toro.
Yeah.
As the guy who's showing Frank his the ropes on his first day.
Yeah, as he's leaving to move up.
So I guess I sort of tipped my hand that I'm a big fan of Swim with Sharks, but where do you land on it?
When I watched it, I wasn't sure if I'd actually seen it before. I think I have seen it before, but maybe once when it came out a long time ago. So it was mostly new to me. And it's really good. God, Kevin Spacey, you just can't say enough about him. He nails it. He owns it. He kills it. And even, you know, these multiple scenes where he's berating his assistant and his assistant leaves and he gets this smile of satisfaction. He just does that kind of thing so well. And I mean, I think we see a darker, more mature version of that in, again, I'm going to say House of Cards.
Yeah.
That he does now. But I think about Hollywood being a tough place full of egos. This is definitely underlined in this. And I think the biggest problem I had, and it wasn't huge overall, but was I didn't quite believe the chemistry between Michelle Forbes' character and Frank. Yeah, I kind of get it. I was like on board like 70% with it,
to me, she's a hardened producer and she doesn't trust him. I think it's similar to what they were going for in The Death of Smoochy, but I think better realized in that she has a heart outer shell because she expects everyone to be full of shit. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't believe this yokel act. Mm-hmm. And she's suddenly more interested when she realizes it's not an act. And the fact that he's genuine at all makes him interesting. Yeah. I bought it, I guess, a little bit. For me, the movie does belong to Kevin Spacey. If there's a flaw to his performance, I think it is that he's enjoying it so much. I understand him smiling after Frank Whaley leaves the room, but there's something about the way he's berating him that you can tell he's enjoying himself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I also want to give fair play to Frank Whaley because he gives as good as he gets. Well, at least in the flash forward scenes, you know, with the paper cuts and with him sort of giving him a blow by blow on all of the indignities that he's suffered.
That was the worst. He beat him up, gave him paper cuts on his face, and then poured lemon juice and salt and hot sauce
all over
on it. Oh God.
And shaved his hair, cut up his haircut because he knew he was super vain about his hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're like, this gets really, really personal. Like, what did it lead to? And I think that's maybe one of the more obvious things. That what made it personal? What was the last straw? Well, what are the things that'll ruin any relationship between men? It usually boils down to one of two things: money or women or sex. We'll say, right?
Sure.
So when he believes that Kevin Spacey is going to try and steal his girlfriend from him or humiliate his girlfriend in a power play, that's the last straw. That's the one step too far. He will suffer any indignity thrown at him, it seems. Yeah. And it definitely has taken its toll on him, and he's definitely not the person he was. Mm-hmm. But is he, does he still really want to be part of this? Is this still his dream? Is he willing to do anything to be successful in Hollywood?
I think that's a big yes.
And that's where the movie goes, yeah. I don't think we necessarily anticipate the ending, but the movie doesn't lie to us. Frank Whaley wants to make it big in Hollywood, and this is the shortcut to do it. And in the way he does it, he's more successful than anyone because he does it in a year. There's a big confrontation between him and Kevin Spacey when he screams, I didn't give a year of my life to you. And Kevin Spacey cuts him off and said, I did it for 10.
That's right.
He ate that kind of shit for 10 years. That's what turned him into this son of a bitch.
That's
you
right.
did it for 1, and here you are, you crybaby, you need it now.
Totally whiny bitch, yeah.
But he's still, I can't defend his behavior either. He's still a son of a bitch.
No.
But at the end, Frank Whaley has a conscious decision to make, to join the dark side or to stay the pure person that he came to Hollywood as.
And and that's, you're right. And towards the end of the movie, we get this big monologue from Kevin Spacey about how he didn't used to be a jerk, about his wife. The whole story about his wife, is a very different side of him. Mm-hmm. And I think is even showing Guy or Frank Whaley that how it can change you so completely. And he still chooses it.
Yeah. He wants to be a big player. He does not want to be the guy who gets yelled at. He wants to be the guy who yells.
Yeah.
He wants to be the guy who yells. Yeah.
And he gets
that's
it.
why he puts up with the shit. And he'll sacrifice anything to get that. If Michelle Forbes was the catalyst to make him torture the boss, she's also the thing he sacrificed to become a Hollywood player.
He sells his soul for it.
It's a bitter pill. And we laugh, and as he's being berated earlier in the movie, and we're on his side throughout the movie. But it's interesting watching it again when you realize that in his heart he is kind of the Kevin Spacey character, or that's who he wants to be. Mm-hmm. That's his mission in life. That's his goal. I want to be his biggest son of a bitch as Buddy Ackerman. And if that is his goal, why is he our protagonist? Why do we want him to be successful? And then that way, I guess we can enjoy him being berated by Kevin Spacey because on some level, maybe he deserved it all along. He kind of proved that by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Michelle Forbes comes out of this movie in a body bag.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She gets blamed for the torture and the, illegal activities. Mm-hmm. And Frank Whaley is raised from assistant to vice president of production or whatever that was. He's
still his bitch.
But Kevin Spacey owns him totally.
That's it, right? He sells his soul to have that power, that title, but in the end, he's in the same position but worse forever.
Yeah.
Because as long as Buddy's alive, he will fucking work that guy any which way he wants, and he will have to bend. Yeah. He can never. He played his card, right? And so.
That's where the sort of horror angle does come in. It's not the torture scenes, although the paper cut scene, you're right, is horrifying. Mm-hmm. But it is about that choice. It's not about somebody who put up with that and came out the other side a better person.
Yeah.
No. He was ground up and became another son of a bitch, another piranha in the tank.
Yeah. Yeah. And when Buddy comes to get him, and he's wearing that really silly baseball hat, actually. It just looks really odd.
He's
it doesn't
look
like
his hair. Yeah.
He is, but it just doesn't look like his character either. It's really silly, and just the look he gives him, right, is just like, you're over, you're done. He calls him to his office, and it's just clear that, it's it's great, it's dark, it's funny, it's got great lines. And then at the end, it's like, it's like
I do want to emphasize the funny, too, because we've been talking a lot about sort of where it leads, the sort of twist or the sort of darkness of the ending.
Yeah.
The journey getting there is quite light and quite funny. And I'm usually off about the romance. I did not buy their romantic angle, and I understood the mechanism of it in the plot, that this was going to be... It was going to be important. It wasn't a superfluous love angle. It was the one thing that you thought he wasn't willing to lose. In a way, it makes sense that she seems out of his league in that. That's another reason why he wouldn't want to make that sacrifice. Yeah. I've said before, Frank Whaley, and I'm a fan of his, but it sounds mean when I say it, but he's got this weird kid energy to him. He seems like he doesn't quite fully grown up into himself somehow. But he's a really good actor. He's sort of good in that sort of low status being kicked role, you know?
Yes, he is.
He's memorably one of the first people to get killed in Pulp Fiction. I think he's really good, but it kind of sucks when you got to share half the movie with Kevin Spacey, and he's got these really juicy speeches, and he's just killing it. Killing it. Overall, I really do recommend Swim with Sharks. When it first came out, this was like one of my favorite movies for a while. Like, I just loved the shit out of it when it came out in the 90s. I think I'm a little less enthused about it as time goes on, but it's still great, worthy for the performances, and it's a good bitter comedy. But there's some darkness there.
Yeah, fun fact.
Fun fact
about Swimming with Sharks, it was made into there's a stage adaptation of it, which when we were talking about it earlier does make sense.
Yeah.
You can really see it when you watch the movie. I thought what was interesting is that the adaptation was done in London in 2007 and Singapore in 2012, but the movie came out in 1994. So it's interesting that over, 10 years later,
an audience out there.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, like Wag the Dog, the themes in politics, the themes in Hollywood still ring true as well, right?
Yeah.
I have no doubt that it's an egotistical rat race and you shoot down whoever you can and it's a fickle business and you're only as good as your last movie and all that shit. I totally believe it.
Wow. I want to get, for me personally, of the movie business, I want to work in the arty end as much as possible and the producing end as little as possible, but it's a business. It's a business.
And, in Hollywood proper, with the big corporations running it,
and it's worthy. It's a worthy place for satire. So that's why there's so many movies about Hollywood producers being sons of bitches.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of Hollywood producers who are sons of bitches.
It's funny because it's true.
So that was 6 comedies that are secretly horror movies reviewed, and now it is time to rank them. This is your third episode.
Mm-hmm.
Your third episode for your third time returning Chuck World. How are you gonna rank these movies? I'm fascinated. I think we have a chance of going for 6 for 6, maybe. I don't know. That's exciting.
I don't know. We'll see. Number 6. I think you know. I think our listeners know.
Nothing But Trouble, maybe?
Yes, Nothing But Trouble.
Okay.
A swing and a miss, as I said. I'll go back. I'll still give them kudos for production value. You can see where the money was spent, but yeah, that did not work out. Don't bother seeing it.
It's not even an interesting catastrophe, right? It's not like so bad it's good. It's just a trial. It just is.
There's not even one good zinger moment or anything out of it. You know how sometimes they do that? They ruin the movie with putting the best moments in the trailer.
Yeah, the biggest punchlines lost.
Yeah.
No punchlines.
No. Number 5 was Strange Brew. And I think that's why one of the reasons maybe our list won't match up. We'll see. But again, kudos to the Canadiana kind of, flavor there. I think that's great. But given what else is in this group, I think there were stronger choices. Moving on to number 4. Death to Smoochy. So I had a real hard time with number 2, 3, and 4 in my list. Because I have a lot of love for Death to Smoochy. The kind of nostalgic value of it being on heavy rotation with our friends, and that kind of thing. But really, it's not as well realized as some of the other choices on the list. It's a lot of fun, though.
It may not be the worst movie ever made, but it's certainly not awful. But not awful doesn't necessarily give it a high placement on the list, right?
Right, right, exactly. So number 3, I put Swimming with Sharks. And I'm going to talk about my number 2 at the same time because they're connected in terms of where I chose to put them on the list. Number 2 is Wag the Dog.
Right.
So those two, they're both really, really good. And in the end, I felt like Swimming with Sharks is kind of more on one concept. My boss is an asshole and he's driving me to the brink. Whereas I felt Wag the Dog had a more complex theme going on with it. And it was, I don't know, maybe a bit meatier, I suppose. But they're both really well done and really well realized. And I enjoyed watching both of them. And I think that they're still worth a watch these days as well. And you could redo them. You could do both of those movies and just tweak a few things for today's standards and they would still...
They're very watchable, but
yeah.
Like they didn't hurt to rewatch. It wasn't hard to revisit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then number 1 being John Malkovich. Being John Malkovich is so original and visually interesting and strange and weird and quirky and unexpected and mysterious, and it makes you stop and think about things you wouldn't normally stop and think about.
Yeah.
Right? It really leaves you with an impression. If you're willing to go down the rabbit hole of that film, it kind of really stays with you in an interesting way. And I think that when filmmakers do that kind of thing these days, I mean, you're always taking a risk when you release things to the public and ask for their opinion. But especially when it's so odd. Yeah. Like being John Malkovich is, but it's successful. Yeah, and so I thought it really earned its spot at number 1.
Well, I was half right. I mean, we're not giving out prizes yet again. 39 episodes, still just one winner. But we do definitely agree with the top and bottom. I will give that right out. Like, I don't need to... I didn't have anything really good to say about anything. So I kept trying. Like, I love the people in it. There's people in it that I really like. And I know that somebody worked really hard on those special effects. But it's this just grotesque spectacle that is just not worth anyone's time. Mm-hmm. It just, ouch. I wish it could say that this was so bad it's good. That's where we landed with Nothing But Trouble. In 5th place, and this may seem low considering how much I hyped it, but I put Death to Smoochy. We just watched it again together the other night, and like I re-fell in love all over with Michael Imperioli's character. Yeah. Smoochy! I love you, Sheldon. But, it does have its charm, but it's longer than it needs to be, and it does have its problems. Yep. Like I'm saying, it does not deserve the horrible reputation that it has. Mm-hmm. It's totally decent, it's totally watchable, and it's a strong, dark comedy, but it falls well short of amazing. Robin Williams has some brilliant moments in here. Like, one of my favorite things is when he's get out of the business while you still have your dignity. Ow, fuck my balls. Like, great moments. But then there are other times where I think he's just a little bit, a little too far off the hook. That, DeVito didn't rein him in quite enough. Mm-hmm. And like I say, the tonal shift. I like the movie when it's being dark and funny and satirical and unapologetic, Mm-hmm. And when it tries to pull at my heartstrings or it tries to add real stakes, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I still would say watch Death to Smoochy. Mm-hmm. In fact, I say watch everything on this list except Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah.
So there it is. Sentimentality and nostalgia go a long way. I said it at the top of the review. So Strange View, those hosers managed to make it all the way to 4A, which is pretty good, right? Beauty, eh? It is, for its rough edges and its datedness, it's pretty funny and absurd and weird, and like the Hamlet structure is an interesting if befuddling choice. Mm-hmm. I'm amused that Max von Sydow is a villain in Bob and Doug McKenzie instead of some Bond movie or something like this. Like, The proceedings seem weirdly beneath him, and I love the movie, but like, what the fuck is Max von Sydow doing here? Let's be real. I Am a Proud Canadian, and Strange Brew, The Adventures of Bob and Doug McKenzie. If you don't like it, take off, eh? In third place, I put Leg the Dog, but I am completely sympathetic to you putting it in second place. I think that I find it a bitter pill because of how much truth is in it.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that this was a brilliant piece of satire, but it almost feels real world to me. Like, we are manipulated by the media. I don't know when it actually happened. Some people would say it was the O.J. Simpson trial where the media officially turned on us. Yeah. But it happened at some point, you know, where the news was more about scaring and controlling, you know, a story or the big story that was distracting the real story or whatever paranoid conspiracy theory thing it is. As snappy the dialogue is and as much as I love this kind of comedy, the stakes of the real world have taken a lot of the laughs out of Like the Dog for me. Yeah. It's definitely an interesting movie, and it's a significant movie and worth watching. And I think most things that Mamet, you know, puts his pen to are usually, you know, interesting anyway, in some regards. So, yeah, absolutely. 2 and 3 back and forth on a given day. So, you know, on that one, we're close. So with the Sharks, I made it all the way to number 2. I think I spent too much time in the service industry. I don't necessarily have stories about one particular boss who's a dick, but like when your job is to basically eat shit day in and day out, there is some catharsis. There is some dark fantasies that you have of like petty revenge, you know. You never act them out. You just sort of have these little escapes in your head. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just dump this can over this woman's head while she's berating me?
Yeah.
I am lucky enough to have worked in retail in a shoe department of a major store. Shoes and luggage, I was lucky enough to work in for a while. I know, try not to think of me differently, but there it is. But when you have people who are trying to make fun of you by calling you Al Bundy from Married with Children, but instead calling you Ted Bundy, you want to beat the shit out of those people, but you can't because your job is to be friendly.
Yeah.
The indignities you suffer on a day-to-day basis, I could relate to. Of course, it's amped to a cartoonish level, and I would never take anyone hostage or do this sort of petty revenge. But I think that dark nerve, and I think that this is where the comedy works in the movie before it goes off the dark deep end, like we talk about in the third act, that's there. That's a real thing, especially if you've worked in the service industry. You have had days so shitty where you convinced yourself in the back room at your break that you could punch a stranger in the face, you know?
Yeah.
Toil and work can lead us to these dark places, so I related to it. I've never worked in Hollywood, but I've had shit jobs. Yeah. And I connected there. Great performances all around.
Indeed.
But being John Malkovich is clearly the best movie of the 6 movies, and like as soon as its inclusion on the list, it's a unique, special movie. Like, and there's other really worth talking about, you know, movies by Spike Jonze, and really worth talking about movies that Charlie Kaufman wrote. But this is the one that started it all, and it's one of my very, very favorites. And I think that it earns sort of the title of this: comedies that are secretly horror movies. It's dark, absurdist theater, but in true sense of the theater thing, that it is about something. The world is strange, and yet it has rules that we follow, and it is talking about stuff. People are petty and shitty to each other in a way that this movie, as absurd as it is more honest about than movies that aren't absurd, that are trying to be serious, you know. In the real world, people are a bunch of shades of gray, and increasingly darker shades of gray, it seems. And that this comedy was honest about it, and put good use to Charlie Sheen. I mean,
he was excellent in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
We gotta give him Ferris.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming back again. I know you're gonna come back again. We're gonna talk about some lady killers, some tough ladies.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to it.
Someone is gonna win again. Somebody has to win.
It will happen.
Rank and review will happen soon, but. Charlene Roach, big friend of the show. Is there anything you want to say to the kids on the internet before we sign off?
Keep listening.
Keep listening. That's right. rankandreview@gmail.com. Let me know how you would rank the movies. Tell me I'm full of shit, or, you know, Tell me I'm not. I don't know. It's nice to know people are listening. And so episode 39 is all over. It's in the rearview mirror. It's behind us. Thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. Please feel free to seek us out on iTunes and on Facebook. Please like the page. Give us a positive review, a 4 or 5 star review on iTunes. Helps people to find us. And for me and Charlene, thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. And we hope that you continue. That is all. Anything you'd like to say to the kids at home?
Join us again. Or Larry, at least.